I remember basically everything about that day. Fortunately, my wife and I worked, as I'd mentioned, very close to each other, and we would ride together, and we got to eat lunch pretty much almost every day. And so that particular day, being a Monday, was very stressful in the construction world because everybody has the weekend to think about all the things that they need to make the next week happen. So about lunchtime, I had went up to her clinic and we had eaten lunch. Didn't feel any different or any warning signs or anything. So I walked back to my office, and I remember standing outside because they had turned the air conditioners on. It was so cold, and I literally was wearing a jacket, and everybody made fun of me because I was wearing a jacket. And I found out later that the air conditioner vents were covered up in everybody else's. They were freezing, so all the air conditioning was coming into my office. But I remember standing there going, man, this warm sun. And so I stood there for a few minutes, went into my office. I sat down and I was going to do some engineering drawings. And so I'd gotten some paper, and I was looking for my favorite pencil that I was wanting to draw with. And as I was sitting there, the things on my desk started to move. And I was in an L-shaped desk, and I was sitting like I am now. And I remember going kind of like, wow, that is really weird what is happening to me. And like I said, the papers and everything was moving, so I was very dizzy and disoriented. And for about a period of time, maybe possibly 10 minutes, of course, time in those situations, you're not really coherent, kind of. And I was still sitting in my chair, and I thought to myself, I'm in trouble. I had this sense that I needed to get help, that it was something beyond of what just being a little dazed and confused. As I had reached for the phone, I didn't realize that my whole right side of my body was not able to move. And so in that action of trying to move, I fell out into the floor. And I remember laying there going, what is happening to me? And just the confusion part of it lasted for a little while. But once I knew I was in trouble, I figured out pretty quickly at that particular point that I was nonverbal. I couldn't yell for help. I couldn't do anything. And just with having, I guess, kind of a construction background and how things work, I knew that I had to do something to draw attention for someone to find me. And after hours, usually a lot of times people would, go into other people's offices and talk or something like that. So I thought if I could take this chair, which was on my left side, and be able to turn it over, maybe someone would hear it and possibly come see me and start that rescue process. I was able to work with my left leg and my arm and get the chair to actually turn over. And at that particular point, I remember feeling just so exhausted that, and I really didn't understand why, but I was just so exhausted. The chair went over, and I remember laying there and thinking, at any second, somebody's going to be here. I started that process. I don't know what the length of time was at that particular point, but I knew that no one was coming at that time. In my office was some tall glass windows that goes from floor to ceiling, and I really couldn't see out the windows very well for someone to see me laying in the floor. So with my left arm, I was dragging myself over as much as I could to get my face visual so that they could see me. And within a length of time, possibly about 45 minutes, I believe, is what we had kind of figured up. One of our financial, the head financial lady of the office, she had come back to the back, and most of the time whenever Miss Penny would come back, one of us was in trouble, one of our projects, So it was very unusual for her to come back unless there was a situation. Well, just where I was looking, our HS&E coordinator had a baby, and they'd had some issues, and she was coming back to check on him. So he had not been there for 3 weeks. She normally doesn't come back, and I remember seeing her walk into his office, and I was thinking, just God, please just let somebody find me. And throughout that whole process, your mind will start to wonder what's going to happen to me. I know at this particular point I'm nonverbal. I can't use the right side of my arm, and if Penny doesn't find me, what am I going to do? You know, and I don't want to put this in a bad context, but it's just kind of how my mind thinks. I just didn't want to be a burden or to my family. And I'd kind of come to terms at that particular point that if I didn't get found, I was okay. I know where my future lies, and I'm very confident in that. And so I was okay. I felt a sense of peace. And it's one of those that you don't really understand, but you know that things are okay. And sure enough, within a short period of time, Penny had walked out of the office. And when she walked out of the office, she very easily could have turned and went into a direction where she'd have never found me, which, you know, your mind can play tricks on you a little bit about, you know, what might have happened, but that's not my story. My story is that she did. She came out and we made eye contact. And as you guys may somewhere down the road know, I'm kind of a jokester in a way. I would always do lots of fun stuff in the morning meetings, things like that, to try to liven things up, start your day off with a smile. And so she said immediately that she thought that I was laying in the floor playing some kind of joke. What I didn't realize was that I wear glasses, reading glasses, and help me with computers, stuff like that. And so when she noticed that I had blood all running down this side of my face, she knew it wasn't a joke. And you know, your mind will actually protect you in some degree of feeling so elated whenever Penny found me. I remember laying back going, the process has started, you know, and from that particular point, I just was exhausted. I mean, struggling to be found is kind of a difficult thing to kind of go through, you know, the journey of that. And at that particular point, I knew that I was found. I didn't know what the end was going to look like. I just knew that I was elated is really a good word for it, that process was getting started. And I'm coherent throughout all of this, so trying to process it, you know, and I'm a very analytical kind of person, so I overthink a lot of things. So throughout that, it started the chaos of everyone jumping in, calling 911. Also with the close relationship that I have, my wife would come down and visit. A lot of people that I work with would come in and stuff, and they knew my wife very well. So they immediately called her.
The emotion that comes to mind is scary. We had just had lunch. He left. It was a normal Monday. We joked about the fresh tomatoes we had on our turkey sandwich, you know, for lunch. And literally 37 minutes later, your whole world changes. So just remember being very fearful and shocked. I knew from the tone of the conversation on the phone, I didn't know exactly what I was walking into, but I knew it was bad. And seeing him on the ground, unresponsive to you, is very scary. And I remember the expression is almost like an outer body experience of everyone in the room and their face. I said, "Where's the ambulance? He's had a stroke."
I do remember all the conversations that was had that day. I remember all of the expressions on their face of the employees. It was very traumatic, not only for me, but it was also for them. But luckily at that point, the EMS team had showed up and had done their first initial, you know, evaluation of what's going on with Misty. My wife being an AP, she pretty well knew what had happened at that point. She was able to basically help guide and maybe give some information about what she had already witnessed being a medical professional.
I remember we were very busy that day. We even had third truck that day, which is very rare. We only have 2 trucks in this entire county, running the county 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I remember getting a call, possible stroke, and it was in town, so time is brain. We gotta move fast. I remember getting on scene and there being employees, his friends, coworkers, families. I remember there being a line, pretty much the door being held open for us. I remember his wife telling us that she believes that he's had a stroke, and I remember seeing him laying on the ground. So for strokes, we do BFAST screening. He checked all the boxes. You pretty much didn't even have to do the screening because you could just tell stroke. I remember all of his coworkers helping us get him on the cot. And I remember him mumbling, trying to get words out, but he couldn't. I remember getting in the ambulance. We already knew what was going on, and so we knew what our protocol consists of. Act fast. IVs, alert the hospital to let them know that we're coming in with code stroke. I remember the wife and having to reassure her that we're doing our very best. I remember her wanting to go to Conway.
A week prior, we would have went to Conway, which is, for us, from where we were at, it would have been 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, which would have delayed even longer care for him to get. But we knew they had just got the new protocol and got the medicine to be able to give the medication, the clot buster.
They got me on the gurney, and even to the point that I remember the conversations as I was wheeling me out, a lot of the employees that were there, I wouldn't say employees, let me just call them friends. My friends were there supporting me. I knew at that particular point that I was found, and that you realize real quick that you have a team that's rallying for you.
I remember when I got to the ER, he was in CT at the time because that's the protocol. MedTech takes them straight to CT. They never come off their cot, and then they come back to us. I remember seeing his wife in the room, Misty, and trying to tell her, we're gonna get him through this. We're here, everything's gonna be okay. And I remember when he rolled back through, I didn't know him. I'd never seen him before, but I could see the emotions in his face and just the worry and what is the outcome going to be of this? Because obviously this was not who he was before. And I remember getting the neurologist on the screen and watching my team just roll. And as their leader, I'm going to try not to be emotional, but I have a great team here. And so getting to sit back and watch the hard work that they have put into this and just their teamwork that they did for him, knowing that time was essence, I just took a moment to breathe. And I said, okay, Lord, here we go. He's going to be okay. My team is literally flowing.
I remember someone actually was on a TV screen. I couldn't point them out. I don't know who that might have been, but they were in conversations with the team that was in the emergency room. And at that particular point, somewhere through that, Wendy Morris, she's a nurse and an RN. We'd grown up together, and our dads had worked out the paper mill, so I've known Wendy my whole life. It was awesome, the burst of emotions to know that someone that you have known your whole life now literally your life is in their hands to some degree. The decision was for me to get the shot. And they, if I'm not mistaken, they verbally kind of walked Wendy through the shot, if I'm not mistaken. And then shortly after that, I remember laying there and they started checking my legs to see if I was getting some kind of resistance in my right leg. For some crazy reason, my arm decided to wake up and move around. It was doing all kinds of crazy movements. And I'm looking around like I'm not doing this, like it's a mind of its own. One of the things that really stuck out to me was that through that process, when I was being transferred from the hospital to another hospital, Baptist in Little Rock, Wendy had come out there. And at that particular point, I was starting to mumble a little bit better. And I remember her saying, "Do you remember who I am?" And it wasn't great, but I gave her enough information to know that I knew that it was her. And both of us just emotions just ran. That was very special. We had a very special moment at that particular point. So I'm very thankful for all of those years, of her doing her craft and being who she is. She was able to, at that particular moment, be my angel.
When my mom called me, of course, I pick up the phone. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and they're back in the room. And this is in retrospect, after he had gotten the clot buster medication, I was really frustrated with my parents at the time before then, because I wasn't able to go see my dad, and that was the one thing I wanted to do. So after I wasn't allowed, I basically paced the room. I couldn't sit. So when my mom called, I immediately picked up, and I'm like, give me the 411, I need it right now. And I remember her saying, you're not gonna come back, and your dad we're gonna put him on speakerphone. So I said, okay, I'll take it. And the first words I got to hear from him were, I love you. And hearing that was the best thing I could have ever heard that day. So after that moment, I knew he was gonna be okay.
It's definitely changed my perspective, like my dad said, just not taking anything for granted. It's the small things that matter. Oftentimes I'm like-minded like my dad. I move at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I don't like to slow down very much. But whenever this happened, that really shifted my perspective, just to really appreciate everything, and you start thinking about the small moments. I just remember growing up, the man that taught me, how to hunt and fish and just be, the best version of myself, teaching me responsibility. It definitely shifted my perspective on that and just made me want to be a better version of myself, not only for me, but for my family and the people around us as well.
So the recovery process has been, in some sense, frustrating, but also finding what kind of limitations that you're presented with. Like I said, I was a project manager, so projects where you start from the ground up and you have to start with a really good foundation. So knowing that, I started to inwardly look at myself as a project, and with any good project, you have to have a fantastic team. So in that process, my wife being a nurse practitioner, she was probably the best advocate that I could have ever dreamed of, being able to help me understand of the things that we needed to do. We needed occupational therapy. I needed speech. I'm very blessed and I'm grateful for the change in direction. Now that I've gotten away from work a little bit, I'm starting to appreciate more about what life entails. All the little things that you take for granted, I'm starting to see those in a wonderful light. I'm a survivor and I'm thankful for all of these people and how they've impacted my life. And I want to impact their life too by showing that story that things can and will help other people.